wherever you may be, however you may be listening. Thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of the Cardinals Honest, a podcast. My name is Donnie Drew, joined every week by my main squeeze, Richie Bradshaw. Before we get into the nitty gritty, go to comment, like, subscribe on the video. It certainly does help. All the support is much appreciated. Follow Richie on Twitter at RichieBrads36. Follow me on Twitter at Donnie Drew. And Richie, the 2024 season is officially over. The dust has settled for the Arizona Cardinals, finished with 8 wins, doubling their win total from 2023 under the second-year guidance of head coach Jonathan Gannon. It's going to be a very long offseason, a very fun offseason. We're going to recap 2024 probably a little bit later in the week, but we are here to talk mock draft, my man. It is officially that time of year. Not that draft season is ever actually officially out of swing, but now we're really
Richie Bradshaw.
Yeah, I know, man. Now we're going to put the gas pedal to the floor, for lack of a better term.
Dude, I'm all about it. And one of the things I'm pulling up for myself right now, I didn't think about this, was obviously the Cardinals have a lot of money and everything, and they only have 5 draft picks. And we're going to get to those draft picks and everything, but they got a lot of money to spend in free agency. I'm curious what the big fish are going to be out there. So that's more for me to look up. We'll talk about that at a later time, but let's talk draft, brother.
Let's talk drafts, man. The Cardinals have the 16th overall pick. Kind of just talking on that for a minute. I think they're in a really, really good spot because I feel like every year in the draft, there's always a handful of considerable, like, top tier guys that people think are going to make it inside the top 10 or inside the top 15 that eventually just fall for a reason X, Y, or Z. We can get some really talented players around that like 16th spot. You have the versatility to move up into the top 10 if you want. You can also move back into the 20s and collect more draft capital. It feels like all options are going to be on the table for general manager Monty Austin.
Yeah, and this is a draft that for the Cardinals, you have 5 picks right now. I don't think they move up. If they move down to try and get some more picks, that makes the most sense to me. But I also view this as a draft where you may want to just capitalize where you're at instead of trying to play the board too much. This isn't a draft that people are going to look at and go, oh my God, it's super deep. It's not 2014. It's not 2011. It's not, God, I'd have to look back. 2016 was pretty deep. But it's not one of those drafts. What it is where you're picking, you can probably get a starter. And you'll see in this mock that I have a guy in the 4th round that I think could be an instant starter for the Cardinals, and it's defensive guys. This is a draft that is so good defensively, and it just so happens that the Cardinals' biggest needs are on the defensive side of the football. So with 5 picks, I have them getting 3 starters on defense.
Love it. I absolutely love it. And we'll link the mock draft in the bio of the video, the description.
Sure will.
Let's call it. Let's jump right into it, man. Pick number 16 in the first round. You have the Cardinals taking James Pierce, edge rusher out of Tennessee. Edge rusher is obviously going to be a very, very prominent position for people mocking the Cardinals. Rightfully so. If they need that blue chip caliber guy. I'm interested before we get into James Pierce, because you had talked and highlighted about potential blue chip guys coming to the desert, coming to Arizona. If they do get one of those guys, crazy world, they go get a big name, whether it's a superstar, man, superstar. I'm not going to drop anybody. Do you still think they would go edge rusher round 1?
I think you need to have a very serious conversation about it because the Cardinals did a really good job this year scheming up their pass rush. And I mean, me and you talked about it seemingly every week. And with every article I put together, I constantly was talking about Nick Rallis and praising him for how good him and Jonathan Gannon were able to get the most out of their pass rush this year. They had over 40 sacks, and this is a team that I wasn't sure was going to have 20 sacks this year. That was also without B.J. Ojulari. That was without Darius Robinson for 80% of the season. They just did a really good job generating pressure from all over the place. And they had, not exaggerating, probably a dozen guys that were able to record at least a half sack. It'd be really, really close to that number. But at the end of the day, you still need a guy off the edge. Your scheming is only going to get you so far. And you can get away with it this year, but next year, when teams have more tape on Nick Rallis and what he was able to come up with this year, they're going to have better ideas for how to stop those corner blitzes and everything else that he was able to dial up, the stunts and everything like that. So the Cardinals need to get an ace pass rusher. There's some guys on the free agency market that are interesting, older guys. I know everyone still loves Hassan Reddick and everything, but you got to get a young guy at this point. And this draft has 4 premier edge rushers, and Pierce is probably my favorite. And he came into the year as my top player. He's still like right there. The 4 edge rushers, I mean, you pick one of them, you're going to be really happy. Pierce has a direct line to my heart, so I'm always happy to throw him into the Cardinals.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit more about Pearson, what he is as a prospect. He hasn't officially declared quite yet. I do think the deadline is coming up, but I mean, this is a guy who is expected to be around that like top 15, top 20 range in terms of draft position. What is Pierce as a pass rusher?
My first mock I ever did was Pierce #1 overall to the Panthers. And I still view him as a guy who should be the best pass rusher in this class. Now, Abdul Carter, it's hard not to put him one at this point with everything that he's put together and seemingly limitless upside in front of him. But Pierce is already an elite edge rusher. 2-time SEC. Let me try it again. First time. Let me try it again. 2-time first team all SEC. There we go. Third time's the charm. This dude's a stud, Donnie, and he's already got the size. God, I wrote it down, of course, and I didn't think to have it in front of me here. Oh, I didn't write it down. Nice. I want to say he's around 6'4", 6'5", 250 some odd pounds, but the frame is still long enough for him to continue getting bigger and everything. And I think that he's already a great pass rusher. There's the ability for him to continue growing and becoming someone that can anchor the edge against a run and everything, but that'll come in time. In the meantime, you just put him on the field, ask him to pin his ears back and go after the quarterback, and he's instantly someone that's going to lead the Cardinals in sacks as a rookie.
Like I said, do you think he could be one of those guys who comes in right away and makes an instant impact?
Oh, yeah, definitively. I love him to pieces. 6'5", 243 is what he is listed at on ESPN. Gotcha. So he can still add like 10 or 15 pounds to that frame, but he's big, he's long, it's phenomenal. 7.5 sacks this year, and he didn't have a sack for the first handful of games because Tennessee rotated their defense a lot. And as you would imagine, teams went into this season knowing who James Pierce was, and they doubled him and did whatever they could. So 7.5 sacks doesn't seem like a lot until you realize he was rotated in so much on a terrific defensive line. He's phenomenal.
Yeah, so, evaluating the Cardinals edge group right now, Zaven Collins coming off of a kind of lackluster year, pass rushing wise, not the problem, but with Zaven Collins, he does everything well except what a lot of edge rushers are paid for: quarterback hits, quarterback pressures, quarterback sacks. You still need a guy who can get to the passer down after down. Can BJ Ojulari be that guy coming off a major injury? Can any of the other rotational guys, are they going to bring back Baron Browning? Like Julian Okwara made a handful of plays down the stretch. There's really no solidified guys unless Xavier Thomas takes a massive leap in year 2. And that is no shade to any of those guys I just named. But if you add a guy like Pierce who can come in right away and provide that presence, along with hopefully bolstered interior defensive line, along with a monster in the waiting in Darius Robinson, it could get spooky, man. It can get really spooky for Arizona. So I think Pierce would be a very, very nice addition. You're picking a second round, Richie. Tyleik Williams. Again, another addition on the defensive side of the ball, another addition to the defensive front seven, which I talked about. Hopefully the defensive line gets bolstered. That's exactly what you do here.
Tyleik Williams. I don't know when he peaked at Ohio State because he had a great freshman year, but he's gotten better every year. But his best statistic years have been kind of spread around. He had 5 sacks as a true freshman. He's had a handful of sacks every other year. He's obviously still playing this year for a national championship. He's got time to add to it. But I look at Tyreek Williams and I just see this guy that's got so much potential to continue getting better and better and better. And I've seen him in the first round of some mock drafts recently. I don't have him there quite yet. I think if I ever get to that point, it would be in that very late 20s to that 30, 31, 32 range. So getting him here is phenomenal. And he's a big dude. He's almost 330 pounds. So he can anchor inside as that nose tackle for you. But again, there is some pass rushing upside to him. And when you look at Tyreek, I think that there's a near limitless amount of potential for him, excuse me. It's really exciting to think about what you could possibly get out of him. And he's not like Jalen Carter or anything like that, but there is potential for him to grow into that kind of a player. I just don't think it's going to take him a lot more to get there than it did Jalen Carter or Dexter Lawrence to get to where they're at. But Tyreek could be able to get there with the coaching and all that other good stuff that we constantly talk about. But he's exciting. And putting him next to Dante Stills, who it's not a secret that we love him on this show.
Yep.
He could see an immediate role for the team. And in a worst case scenario, I mean, you take your time and you make him a 2-down player and rotate him in with some of the other guys.
Well, I was going to say, man, good thing you have Justin Jones and Bilal Nichols that will be coming off of the injury reserve next year too. I think Williams is in a good spot because I don't feel like he would be required to come in here and ask to make an instant impact right away. I do think he would have that time to kind of get his feet settled and eventually find his footing whenever that might be.
Right. And I love the potential of a defensive line that left to right is BJ Ojulari, Tyreek Williams, Dante Stills, James Pierce. That sounds good. With depth behind them like Zaven Collins, Bilal Nichols.
Darius Robinson. D-Rob.
Did I not say Robinson? I thought I did. Who's my second edge rusher? I'm pretty sure it's a Darius Robinson. I said James Pierce. Oh, okay. So Darius Robinson would be my first edge rusher. Okay. Okay, yeah. Anyways, final answer would be Darius Robinson.
The good news is that the Cardinals rotate those guys so heavily anyway.
Right. Dude, in my head, I definitely said Darius Robinson. That's funny. No, Robinson would be your other starting edge rusher. So there you go. Yeah, I definitely said him in my head. That's crazy.
You're good, man. So, no, really like the Williams pick. In round 2, round 3, Tate Ratledge. Sell me. Because there's some thought about the Cardinals interior guard position that people think will carry into the offseason. So I want to hear your opinion.
I like him. I think that he's just classic smash mouth football. You play at Georgia, you kind of need to have that edge with you, and he plays with that edge. He looks really good for the position. Again, you just want a dude who's nasty, who has that bully mentality, and that's him. So I love the thought of just throwing him in there to potentially be your heir apparent to Will Hernandez, whether that's this year or down the road. I think that there's a lot of similarities between those guys. And you put Ratledge in a phone booth with another defensive lineman, he's going to beat the piss out of him. Like, I just think that this guy's ready for the next level. And there's been a conversation for a while of like, do guards matter? Like, do you take them round 1 or do you take them later in the draft and get good production out of them? Whatever you want. I'm always of the belief of like, yeah, some positions are devalued to a certain extent, but you get good football players. Well, Ratledge would be of the latter of, well, why would I take a guy in the first round when I can get Tate Ratledge in the 3rd round and he can be an immediate starter for me? He's part of the reason you have that discourse. He's really good football player.
Yeah, so Evan Brown, starting left guard, is set to hit free agency. Will Hernandez, who obviously was on injured reserve this year, started at right guard beforehand. He's set to hit free agency. Isaiah Adams, who had started the last couple of games for Arizona, there was some momentum built with him through the last couple of games. There's some thought to think that he could be the starting right guard. But regardless, you would still need another guy at left guard. Or like worst comes to worst, man, you get Radledge in here. You have him compete for either guard spot because the Cardinals more than anything covered that versatility. I don't know what his snap counts look like, whether he plays majority left or majority right, but definitely if he does land in Arizona, like he probably will have to master both spots. I don't think Arizona's offensive line played bad by any stretch of the imagination this year, but there's certainly room for improvement.
Yeah.
If you can get a dog in there, like you said, like put him in a phone booth with anybody, he'll come out alive. If you see him in a forest fighting a bear, help the bear, right? Like it's kind of like those are the guys you definitely want.
Yep. Speaking of dogs.
Ooh. Speaking of dogs, fourth round pick.
Also, you mentioned a dog talking about a Georgia Bulldog. That's funny. But speaking of dogs, Denzel Burke.
Sell me on Denzel Burke. You've been hyping him up for a minute now.
Brother, I love Denzel Burke. I loved him in last year's draft cycle, but he opted to go back to Ohio State. He was fine in 2023. This year, he's been much more good than he has been bad, but we've kind of figured out what he is. And that's a guy who likes to gamble and a guy who can make some really good plays or can have you screaming at your TV. I don't want to call him Marcus Peters. I don't want to call him Jack Jones or anyone like that. That truly is like that all or nothing corner because I think there's a lot more here for Denzel Burke to work on. And he's got the size at 6'1", 193. He's a local kid too. Played at Saguaro out in the West Valley. And he's a good football player. But he's been on my radar for a couple of years now. He should be coming out. I don't think he has any more eligibility, but I don't know. I never know anymore when it comes to these collegiate guys and how many years they have to play and everything. But what I do know is Denzel can immediately find a role with the Cardinals. And the Cardinals have a corner room that me and you like quite a bit with Garrett Williams. Max Melton has shown some potential. Starling Marte is a good football player.
Thomas.
Or not. I'm sorry?
Starling Thomas.
Starling Marte.
You're in a baseball season, brother. I like it.
Yes. Brother, apparently my mind's all over the place. I don't know who
training's
Darius
next
Robinson
month, man.
is.
You're right on. You're right on the cue.
That is true. But Burke could slide in and be a starter for you immediately.
So I like I like Burke as a prospect. Where you lose a lot of people here is adding a corner where there might be other positions of needs. Because like you said, Garrett Williams, Max Melton, Starling Thomas, if they can continue improving, that's a really, really good trio. Counterpoint to that train of thought, though, you can never have enough good corners. Sean Murphy Bunting didn't exactly fill the shoes everybody thought he would have this year.
What was his contract anyways?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think it was...
He signed multi-year, didn't he?
Yeah. So he's at least under contract with them through next season.
Which would definitely play into this decision, but I still look at fourth round and that there's a starting corner right there for me. That's hard for me to turn down.
Yeah, and at that point, day 3, you're just looking at good football players, not necessarily positions of need. And if Burke's there, man, yeah. Murphy Bunting signed a 3-year, $22.5 million deal with the Cardinals. So I do think there's an out after next year, according to Spot Track.
We're a Spot Track family here on the Arizona Cardinals on SI podcast. So
I like Over the Cap too, man. I think both of them.
We are a Spot Track family here.
So they do have an out for Murphy Bunting after the 2025 season where they can cut him, and it would only be $2 million towards the dead cap.
There you go. But no, big fan of Burke. And even if you get him this year and take your time behind the scenes with Murphy Bunting and all those other guys ahead of him, I mean, year 2, Burke might be your number 1 corner. He is a starter for sure.
Well, dude, like I said, man, you can just never have enough talent. at a position, and especially the injuries start to pile up too, man. Like you really don't want to have to rely on some of the guys at the bottom of the depth chart if you're actually going to be the competitive team that everybody hopes that you will be moving into 2025 and beyond too. I think that's something people need to remember as well, is that like these guys should not only be judged based off of 1 year of production. So if Burke, fourth round pick in this case, doesn't play a whole lot, it doesn't mean it was a bust, doesn't mean it was a wasted pick. Like there's so much layering that goes into the career of these guys. Um, I think a lot of people get caught up in the short term narrow view. My voice is going out. Regardless, though, if you can get a talented guy like that a little bit later in the draft, you have to like your chances of developing him. So, big fan of that pick. And then capping it off, my man, I was interested to see this pick. Take it away, Mr. ASU
Blast
Sun
from the
Devil.
past.
Locked on Sun Devils.
Locked on Sun Devils and Locked on Gators. Elijah Badger, wide receiver. Played 4 years at Arizona State. He redshirted in 2020, so he actually did have one more year of eligibility if he wanted it because of that COVID season. But 4 years at Arizona State, opts to go to Florida in the spring portal last year, which coincidentally was around the time that Jaden Rashada entered, but I think it had more to do with Rashad Samples, the receivers coach, leaving Arizona State at that same time. Neither here nor there. What we do see is him go to Florida and be their number one receiver. And he was the number one receiver at ASU for the last 2 years. You look at his statistics and you're like, oh, that's weird. He never had a 1,000-yard year. He doesn't have any notable accolades. He was never all conference. He didn't have anything too noteworthy to his resume. And it's a shame because Badger's a really good football player. Like ASU fans remember Elijah Badger very fondly, and we didn't want to lose him. And now you kind of wonder what the playoff would have looked like if Badger was out there after Jordan Tyson had gotten injured for Arizona State. But he's a really good football player. And there was some hope from ASU fans that he could climb his way into the first round. Instead, he's a day 3 guy. I've seen him in the 7th round. I think that's insane. I think this is still a receiver who can immediately find an impact on the field for you. And he's got special teams prowess too. So if you can't find a spot for him in your top 3 or 4 receivers, he can still be your primary return man and be a very good one at that. But Badger's a really good football player. And I love getting him on day 3 of the draft to add him to that room with Michael
Wilson.
Dude, Wilson. I was going to say Thomas. I seriously just don't know what's going on in that. Wilson.
I love Jaws.
I love Philadelphia. Anyways. No, but we all know Marv's number 1. Michael Wilson is number 2 for sure. But Badger can push Wilson, and Badger can push the rest of the room as well, which, quite frankly, I'm not overly impressed with the depth chart after Michael Wilson. And Badger's someone who can come in and down the road turn into wide receiver 3, or who knows, if Michael Wilson prices himself out of Arizona down the road, he could be your number 2 receiver. Badger's a really good football player. I know that ASU fans remember him very, very fondly. And if you want to look at his season in Florida and go, oh, he didn't even catch 40 passes, I'd remind you that he caught almost 21 yards per reception. He was number 1 receiver there. He was number 1 receiver here.
Very fair. To note, guys like Zach Pascal, Zay Jones, and Greg Dortch are set to hit free agency this offseason. Dortch is a restricted free agent, so the Cardinals have a little bit better chance of bringing him back if they want. But nonetheless, I think receiver is going to be a position to watch after the first 2 rounds, I would say, because I think the need for an upgrade at wide receiver 3 behind Harrison, behind Michael Wilson, I think it's probably bigger than some people think.
And I think that ends up being a position that we see them address in free agency, is bring some kind of veteran in. I know this is going to sound like, what's the word? Unpopular, I guess. I would not hate Nelson Aguilar being brought into this room. He's really not bad. You just know what he is. But I do think the Cardinals need to get some kind of veteran receiver into this room, like what they wanted to try and do with Zay Jones. But Elijah Badger on day 3 feels like a really good, not even like a lotto pick. We know what he is. It's not like you're gambling on him. We know that he's a next level receiver and he's a really good receiver. You just have the opportunity to make him wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5. I do like Xavier Weaver too. Like, I still think that Weaver has a role with this team, but even drafting guys, I think they need to sign someone in free agency to be a veteran. I'm just looking at the list. Robert Woods wouldn't be someone I would hate either.
There's a lot of Tyreek Hill smoke right now.
That needs to stop. That's for sure. Yes,
we'll do an episode on that.
Oh, don't do that, man. Just don't do it. I would so much rather you roll the dice on Deontay Johnson than make a move for Tyreek Hill.
Wow. I don't know if I agree with that.
Right.
Wowzers. But moving us back to the draft, that concludes your mock draft. In total, man, James Pierce, Tyreek Williams, Tate Ratledge, Densburg. I forgot the L because apparently that's all I do is take L's. Then Elijah Badger. I really like addressing the interior on both sides of the ball, man. It's not sexy. It's not going to sell jerseys, but it's just a very much like meat and potatoes kind of thing. Like you got to build the trenches. That's where football games are won. I would be a fan of the first 3 rounds.
I love the whole draft.
Yeah, no bias.
Well, here's the thing. Like, there's sometimes I'll put a draft together and I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I really like what I was able to get going with this one. And I love that day 3, like Denzel Burke, favorite pick of the draft for sure. And I'm a huge James Pierce guy. I just loved that Denzel Burke was there late for me. And he's going to end up being a value wherever he ends up going. He is Kamari Lassiter. He is this year's Kamari Lassiter. You know what he is, and he's a next level corner. You're going to get him outside of round 1, and he can start for you immediately. And if you have a legit guy on the opposite of him, he's going to have a really good, successful rookie year. Now, the Cardinals don't have Derek Stingley Jr. currently on this team, but again, you could end up stashing Denzel for a year if you wanted to. With the depth that they have at the top, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I love Denzel. I just have a special place in my heart for Elijah Badger, and James Pierce is my guy.
Can't think of a better way to end the podcast, my man. So thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of the Cardinals on SI podcast. Follow Richie on Twitter at RichieBrads36. Follow me on Twitter at Donnie Drew, and go to comment, like, subscribe on the video. And shout out to Locked On Sun Devils, doing some really, really cool coverage over there. So go ahead and follow them. Yeah, man. Yeah. Anything else before we get up?
I don't think so. So if you guys are looking for good basketball to watch, you can check out the Sun Devils. They're playing tonight against Kansas.
Big game. Big game. All right. We will get out of here. We will see you guys next time.